Don't marry him, Mom.
You little liar, you ruined everything!
Maya, what is this? He already has a wife.
Brendan did not say it loudly. That was the thing about him he never needed to. He reached out and plucked the bouquet straight from Maya's hands. Just like that. No warning. Like it was his to take. Then he held it up, tilted his head, and looked her over. The way someone looks at a stain they can't quite get out of a white shirt. You know, he said, his voice smooth and quiet. Your mother's worked so hard to build something beautiful here. And then she puts a black girl in a white dress at the front of the church. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. Let's just hope you don't make a scene and embarrass her, like you people tend to do. He dropped the bouquet back into her arms. Then he straightened his gold cufflinks, glanced at her one more time, and added almost as an afterthought, your father left her alone in this world. I'm the best thing that ever happened to your family. The least you could do is smile and stay quiet. Maya's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Brendan leaned in on final time, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, suffocating, and whispered directly into her ear, nobody in that church is going to believe a word you say, sweetheart. You're 16, you're black, and I'm the man your mother chose. He walked away without looking back. Maya stood completely still while the organ music swelled behind the chapel doors. She had exactly 11 minutes before the ceremony began, and in her other hand, pressed flat against her palm, was a folded piece of paper that was about to destroy everything Brendan had built. Don't go anywhere, because what Maya does in that church will shake every single person in that room to their core. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is there, and if you believe every child deserves to be heard, hit subscribe. This story is about to get real. What's going on, everybody? I travel America one story at a time, searching for the kind of moments you never forget. Pull up beside me. Memphis, Tennessee sits on the edge of the Mississippi River, like a city that has always known both beauty and heartbreak in equal measure. The summer heat there is not just warm, it is thick, pressing down on your shoulders like a hand that refuses to let go. It was in this city on a Tuesday afternoon in early September that Diana Lawson finished a 12-hour shift at Regional One Health, peeled off her scrubs in the hospital locker room, and sat down on a bench with her eyes closed for exactly 4 minutes before she had enough strength to drive home. She did this every night. She had been doing it for 3 years. Diana was 43 years old, a registered nurse in the emergency department, and a widow. Her husband, Calvin Lawson, had died in a 2-car collision on UE 40 on a rainy November evening 3 years prior. He had been coming home from a parent-teacher conference at Maya's school. He had been 39 years old. He had been the kind of man who remembered to buy flowers, not on anniversaries, but on random Wednesdays, just because he thought Diana looked tired and deserved something beautiful to look at. When he died, Diana did not fall apart. She could not afford to. Maya was 13. The mortgage was real. The hospital bills were real. The grief was real, but Diana Lawson had learned long ago that real things do not wait for you to be ready. She kept working. She kept driving Maya to school. She kept the lights on and the refrigerator full and the front porch swept clean. And she kept going. Maya watched all of this. She was 16 now, tall and lean from years of basketball with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn jaw. She and Diana had developed a closeness that only comes from shared loss, the kind where two people stop needing to explain things to each other because they have already survived the unsurvivable together. They ate dinner at the kitchen table every night Diana was not on shift. They watched old movies on Sunday mornings. They talked about Calvin not with tears, but with laughter, pulling out old stories like treasured photographs kept in a shoebox. Their life was not easy, but it was theirs. Then 7 months ago, Brendan Calloway walked into it. Diana had been in the hospital waiting area during a break drinking bad vending machine coffee and scrolling through her phone when a man sat down 2 seats away and said without looking up from his own phone, "That coffee is terrible. I don't know why we keep buying it." Diana looked up. He was white, broad-shouldered with silver at his temples and the kind of easy smile that suggested he had never had a reason to be nervous in his life. He was well-dressed without being flashy. He said his name was Brendan Calloway. He said he was a civil engineering contractor. He said his firm was doing renovation work on the hospital's east wing. He said all of this warmly, naturally, as if they were already old friends, simply catching up. Diana laughed at something he said. It was the first time she had laughed at something a man said in 3 years. She noticed that later driving home. She sat with it carefully, the way you sit with something fragile. Over the following weeks, Brendan was consistent. Not overwhelming consistent. He texted at reasonable hours. He brought coffee to the hospital reception desk with a note that just said, "Better than the vending machine." He asked questions about Maya and remembered the answers the next time. He did not rush. He did not push. Diana introduced him to Maya on a Saturday afternoon at their home on Prescott Avenue. Brendan arrived with a small potted plant for the porch and a handshake for Maya, not the performative kind that adults give teenagers to seem cool, but a genuine direct handshake that said, "I am taking you seriously." Maya shook his hand and smiled politely. But she watched him. That was the thing people underestimated about Maya. She had her father's eyes, yes. But she had developed in the years since his death a particular kind of stillness, a patience, the ability to sit back and observe without being observed. She had learned it the hard way when you lose a parent young. You start paying very close attention to what the adults around you are actually doing versus what they are saying. And from the very first afternoon, Maya noticed things, small things, the kind that are easy to dismiss individually but accumulate over time like water filling a glass. Brendan never took a phone call in front of them, not once. If his phone buzzed, he would glance at it, and if he needed to answer, he would excuse himself. Always stepping outside, always pulling the door shut behind him, always returning with the same easy smile and a seamless transition back into conversation, as if the call had simply been a work matter too dull to mention. He had no social media presence. None. In 2024, a 47-year-old successful contractor with a thriving business had no LinkedIn profile, no Facebook, no company website that featured his name or photograph. Maya spent 45 minutes one evening searching and found absolutely nothing. He always paid in cash. Restaurants, coffee, groceries, cash. Every time. And there was one more thing, the most unsettling thing, the one that Maya could not shake, no matter how hard she tried. Brendan was never fully present in a room. He looked present. He smiled, he laughed, he asked questions, he touched Diana's arm at the right moments. But his eyes, when he thought no one was watching, were always moving, cataloging exits, measuring distances, calculating. Maya knew that look. She had seen it once before on a man her Uncle Marcus had warned her about years ago. It was the look of someone who always had one foot pointed toward the door. She just did not yet know why. Brendan moved into the house on Prescott Avenue on the first Saturday of November, 4 months after he and Diana began dating. He arrived with 2 suitcases, a box of kitchen equipment, and a bottle of champagne that he said was for celebrating new beginnings. Diana was glowing. Maya smiled and carried one of the boxes inside without being asked. Within 2 weeks, the house had already begun to change. It started with small things, the kind of adjustments that sound entirely reasonable when explained out loud. Brendan suggested rearranging the living room furniture because the current layout, he said, did not take advantage of the natural light. Diana agreed the room did look brighter afterward. He suggested replacing the curtains in the kitchen because the old ones were faded. Diana agreed. He offered to clear out the spare room because he said they could use it as a proper home office instead of having Diana's paperwork piled on the dining table. Diana agreed. The spare room had been Calvin's. His old basketball trophies from community leagues were in there. His record collection. 2 cardboard boxes of his clothes that Diana had never been able to give away. A framed photograph of Calvin and Diana at their wedding. A second one of the 3 of them at Maya's first birthday. And a child's drawing made by Maya at age 5 of a stick figure family standing in front of a yellow house. Within a week of Brendan moving in, all of it was in the garage. Maya discovered this on a Thursday evening when she went looking for one of Calvin's jazz records that she sometimes played while doing homework. She stood in the doorway of the spare room, now outfitted with a sleek desk, a printer, and a cable management system, and did not move for a long moment. She found the boxes in the garage stacked neatly in the corner under a plastic tarp. She did not say anything to Diana that night. She did not say anything the next night either. She carried the boxes up to her own bedroom, instead arranged the photographs on her dresser, and sat on her bed in the dark for a while. The personal cuts came next. Brendan had a way of delivering them that was almost admirable in its precision. He never insulted Maya directly, not in front of Diana. Anyway, he used the language of concern, of perspective, of gentle, loving guidance. Basketball is wonderful, Maya, truly, but Division I recruiting is incredibly competitive. What's the backup plan? You don't want to be left with nothing to show for it. This delivered at the dinner table while Diana nodded along thoughtfully. An A- is still a good grade, sweetheart. Though I always found that the kids who settle for almost perfect are the ones who struggle later. Just something to think about. This when Maya showed Diana her history test. You know, Diana, I read that teenagers who spend this much time with headphones in tend to have real trouble with face-to-face communication down the line. Might be worth addressing now. This said from behind a newspaper, loud enough for Maya to hear from the hallway. Each comment was small. Each one had a logical, caring surface. Each one landed exactly where it was intended to land. Maya went to Diana twice. The first time she sat across from her mother at the kitchen table and said carefully, "Mom, I need to tell you something about the way Brendan talks to me when you're not in the room." Diana listened, or she appeared to listen. Then she said, "Maya, sweetheart, I know this is a huge change. It's hard. It was hard for me too when things shifted in this house. But Brendan is trying. He really is. And sometimes the things we hear feel harsher than they're meant to. Mom, I need you to give him a chance. Please. For me." Maya gave her the chance. The second time was 3 weeks later after Brendan told Maya quietly in the kitchen, while Diana was in the shower, that her natural hair looked unprofessional and that she might want to consider presenting herself differently if she wanted to be taken seriously in life. He said it calmly, the way you tell someone they have spinach in their teeth. Helpful. Concerned. Maya went to Diana and told her exactly what he had said word for word. Diana's face did something complicated. It moved through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, discomfort, a flash of anger, before settling into something that looked terribly like doubt. "Are you sure that's exactly what he said?" Maya stared at her mother. "Because Brendan told me earlier today that he'd tried to give you some career advice and that you'd taken it the wrong way. He was worried about it, actually. He came to me first." The room went very quiet. Maya understood then, fully finally, what Brendan had been doing. Not just to her, but to Diana. He had been building a version of Maya in her mother's mind. Difficult, jealous, oversensitive, a grieving teenager who could not accept change. He had been constructing that narrative for months, brick by careful brick, so that when the moment came, when Maya finally said something that mattered, Diana would already have a frame to put it in. "He went to you first," Maya repeated slowly. Diana nodded. She looked sad, tired. "I love you, baby. You know that. But I need you to try harder with him. Can you do that for me?" Maya walked out of the kitchen. She went to her room, closed the door, and called Uncle Marcus. "Uncle Marcus," she said when he picked up. "Something is very wrong with this man, and I think I'm the only one who sees it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said, "Tell me everything." Uncle Marcus did not dismiss her. That was the first thing, the thing that mattered more than Maya could express. She had been dismissed so many times over the past months by Diana, by her own internal voice that kept asking, "Are you sure? Are you being fair? Are you just grieving?" That when Marcus said, "Tell me everything," and then proceeded to actually listen, she felt something loosen in her chest that she had not realized she had been holding tight. She told him about the comments, the cleared-out spare room, the way Brendan's eyes moved when he thought no one was watching, the no social media, the cash payments, the phone calls taken outside with the door pulled shut. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You said he pays cash. Every time I've seen. And no online presence at all." "Nothing. I searched for 45 minutes. Another pause. "Okay. Don't do anything yet. Don't say anything else to your mother. Just keep your eyes open and write down what you see. Date time what happened. Like a log. Can you do that?" Maya looked at the notebook on her desk, the one she already had. "I already started." She heard Marcus exhale. "Good girl. I'll make some calls." Over the following 2 weeks, Maya became methodical in a way that surprised even herself. She had always been organized. Her father had been an engineer, her mother a nurse. Precision was essentially a family value. But this was different. This was focused. This was the feeling of a 16-year-old girl who had run out of adults to trust and had decided quietly and without drama to handle it herself. She kept the notebook under her mattress. Every evening before bed, she recorded the day's observations. Brendan left the house at 7:40 a.m. most mornings, ostensibly for the construction site. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he did not return until nearly 7 p.m., 2 hours later than every other day. He said it was a longer drive to the East Wing project. Maya noted it. He received calls from a contact saved in his phone simply as K. Maya noticed this when his phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he was in the bathroom. The name K. Not a full name. Not a nickname. Just a single letter, the way you would save someone if you did not want the name to be easily read by someone standing nearby. He had begun asking Diana about her finances in ways that sounded caring, but felt like cataloging. "Have you thought about a joint account? It would be so much simpler for household expenses. And you should really have your retirement portfolio looked over. I know a financial advisor, brilliant guy, very discreet." And once, after Diana mentioned that Calvin had left her a life insurance payout when he died, that kind of lump sum just sitting in a standard savings account is basically losing value every year. We should talk about moving it. Diana had laughed and said she would think about it. Maya had written it all down. The break came on a Thursday. Maya had stayed home from school with a headache, genuinely not strategically, and was lying on the living room sofa with a damp cloth over her forehead when she heard Brendan's phone buzz on the coffee table. He had left it there when he went to make coffee. She did not reach for it. She did not touch it. But from where she was lying, the screen was visible, and the preview of the message was right there. "The kids keep asking about you. Told them you're on a long job. How much longer? The name above the message was K. Maya sat up slowly. The damp cloth fell to the floor. She stared at the words until Brendan came back into the room and pocketed his phone in one smooth motion, his expression completely unchanged. "Feeling better?" he asked. "A little," she said. She wrote it down that evening word for word as best she could remember. "The kids keep asking about you." That night she lay awake for a long time turning it over. The kids. Not my kids. Not our kids. Just the kids the way you would say it to their father. She opened her laptop and began searching again. This time she was not looking for Brendan Calloway in Memphis. She broadened it. She tried different combinations, the name, the profession, civil engineering contractor, Tennessee, surrounding states. She tried image searches using the one photograph she had managed to take covertly with her phone, a shot of Brendan standing in the backyard that she had pretended to take of the garden. Nothing in Tennessee, nothing in Mississippi, nothing in Arkansas. She expanded further. Georgia, Kentucky, Ohio. It was on the 14th search, Brandon Calloway, Columbus, Ohio, that she found it. A small article from the Columbus Dispatch, dated 4 years ago. A community fundraiser for a local elementary school. There was a photograph of attendees, and in the second row, smiling with his arm around a woman and 2 small children standing in front of him, was a man she recognized instantly. The same broad shoulders, the same silver at the temples, the same easy, practiced smile. The caption read, "Brandon and Cheryl Calloway, with their children's supporters of the Franklin Elementary Renovation Fund." Brandon. Not Brendan. One letter different. The same face. Maya's hands were completely steady when she screenshotted the article, saved it to a private folder, and sent the link to Uncle Marcus with a single message, "Found him." His real name might be Brandon. He has a wife in Columbus. She closed the laptop. She sat in the dark, and she thought, "I need to find Cheryl." Uncle Marcus drove a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that smelled like motor oil and old coffee, and he drove it the way he did everything else in life, steadily, without hesitation, taking the turns as they came. He picked Maya up at the corner of Prescott Avenue at 6:30 on a Saturday morning, before Brendan was awake, before Diana came home from her overnight shift. Maya climbed in with her backpack, her notebook, and the folded printout of the Columbus Dispatch article. Marcus looked at the photograph for a long time before handing it back. "That's him," he said. It was not a question. "That's him," Maya confirmed. He pulled onto the highway without another word. Columbus was a 6-hour drive from Memphis. They had all day. Marcus was 51, broad and quiet, a man who had spent 20 years working construction and the last 10 running his own small contracting crew in East Memphis. He was the kind of man who fixed things without making a production of it, who showed up when you needed him without waiting to be asked twice. He had not liked Brendan Calloway from the first Sunday dinner. He had said so to Diana plainly. Something is off about this man. And Diana had asked him to leave early. He had gone without argument, but he had called Maya the following week just to check in. That call was the reason Maya had a ride to Columbus. They talked some during the drive and were quiet some. Marcus asked careful questions about everything Maya had logged in her notebook, and she read him the entries in order, her voice steady. When she got to the part about the financial conversations, the joint account, the retirement portfolio, the life insurance payout, Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He just nodded and kept driving. They arrived in Columbus just after noon. The address from the fundraiser article had led them, after some cross-referencing with property records on Maya's phone, to a quiet residential street in the Clintonville neighborhood. Modest houses, mature trees, basketball hoop in a driveway 2 doors down. The Calloway house was a beige split level with a small front garden that needed tending and a minivan parked on the street. Marcus pulled up across the road and cut the engine. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Maya said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." They walked to the front door together. Marcus rang the bell. The woman who opened it was white, perhaps 40, with dark circles under her eyes, and the particular exhaustion of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. She had a dish towel over her shoulder and a toddler on her hip, a little boy maybe 2 years old with his father's broad forehead. From somewhere inside the house came the sound of a cartoon playing on a television. She looked at them with polite wariness. "Can I help you?" Marcus spoke first calmly and directly. He said they had driven from Memphis. He said they were not with law enforcement. He said they believed her husband had been living in Memphis under a slightly different name and was 3 weeks away from marrying someone there, and that they were trying to protect that woman before it was too late. Cheryl Calloway did not respond immediately. She looked at them, really looked first at Marcus, then at Maya, and then she looked down at the dish towel in her hands, like she was considering something private. "Come in," she said quietly. The living room was neat, despite the clutter of small children. Maya noticed a framed wedding photograph on the wall near the bookshelf before she could stop herself. Brandon Younger, same smile, standing beside Cheryl in a white dress. Dated and real and documented. Cheryl set the toddler down with a toy and sat across from them. Maya placed the Columbus Dispatch photograph on the coffee table and slid it toward her without speaking. Cheryl looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. Where did you get this?" "It was in the paper. 4 years ago. The Franklin Elementary fundraiser." Cheryl's face went very still. Then she stood, went to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room, and returned with a manila folder. She removed a document and placed it on the table beside the photograph. A marriage certificate. State of Ohio. Brandon James Calloway and Cheryl Ann Morrow. Married 9 years ago. No record of dissolution. No divorce decree. Maya photographed both documents with her phone, her hands completely steady. "Has he been in contact?" Marcus asked. "Not in 6 months. He said he was taking a long contract job in another state. I stopped believing him about 4 months ago." Cheryl's voice was careful, controlled. The voice of a woman who had already done her grieving privately. "I've been calling his number. Sometimes he answers. Sometimes he doesn't. He's in Memphis," Maya said. "He's been living with my mother for 4 months. They're getting married in 3 weeks." Cheryl looked at Maya for a long moment. Really looked at her the way adults rarely bother to look at teenagers. "How old are you?" 16. Something moved across Cheryl's face. Not quite pity. Something more complicated. "He took $63,000, she said quietly. "Joint savings account. Wiped it out the same week he left. I have 2 kids. I'm working 2 jobs. She paused. "He's done this before, hasn't he?" It was not a question, but Marcus answered it anyway. "We think so," he said. "We're still finding out." Cheryl nodded slowly. She looked at the marriage certificate on the table. Then she looked at Maya again. "What do you need from me?" Maya exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. "Would you be willing to talk to the police?" Cheryl picked up the certificate, slid it back into the folder, and held it out across the table. "Take this," she said. "And yes, I'll talk to whoever needs to hear it." They drove back to Memphis in the dark. Marcus had the radio on low, an old Stevie Wonder record, the kind their father used to play on Sunday mornings, and neither of them talked much for the first 2 hours. Maya sat with the manila folder in her lap, one hand flat on top of it, like she was keeping it from floating away. Around Nashville, Marcus said, "You did good today, Maya, real good." She looked out the window at the dark trees passing. It doesn't feel good yet. It won't. Not until it's over. She nodded and said nothing else. They arrived back in Memphis just after 9 p.m. Diana's car was in the driveway. She had come home between shifts to sleep for a few hours. Brendan's car was there too. Marcus idled at the curb, engine running. "You want me to come in with you?" he asked. Maya thought about it. "Not tonight. I need to talk to her alone first." Marcus looked at her steadily. "Call me the second it goes sideways." She went in through the front door and found Diana in the kitchen sitting at the table with a cup of tea and her reading glasses on, going through a stack of paperwork. She looked tired in the good way, the way she looked after a long shift when things had gone well. The kitchen smelled like lemon dish soap and chamomile. Diana looked up and smiled. "Baby, where have you been? I texted you." "I know, I'm sorry. I was with Uncle Marcus." Diana's smile softened slightly. She took off her reading glasses. "Everything okay?" Maya sat down across from her mother. She placed the manila folder on the table between them and pressed her palms flat on top of it, and she looked at Diana very directly and said, "Mom, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Not the way you've been listening, the real way. Because what I'm about to show you is going to be hard, and I need you to look at it before you say anything." Diana looked at the folder, then at Maya. Her expression had gone careful. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'm listening." Maya opened the folder. She walked her mother through everything. The Columbus Dispatch article first. She watched Diana's face as she recognized the man in the photograph. Watched her lean in closer, watched the first flicker of something uncertain cross her features. Then the marriage certificate. Maya read it aloud. Brandon James Calloway, Cheryl Ann Morrow, married 9 years, no record of dissolution. Then she played the recording on her phone, Cheryl's voice, calm and clear, describing the $63,000, the disappearance, the children asking where their father was. Diana listened to the entire recording without speaking. When it ended, the kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street. Diana looked at the marriage certificate for a long time. Then she said, "This could be a different person. The name is almost different. Brendan, Mom. Contractors work all over the country. It's possible, Mom." Maya's voice was steady. "Look at the photograph." Diana looked at it again. Her jaw worked silently. "That's the same man," Maya said. "You know it is. I know you can see it." The silence stretched. And then Diana did something that Maya was not prepared for. She did not get angry. She did not cry. She simply closed the folder very gently and pushed it back across the table toward Maya. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice when it came was composed. "I hear you, baby. I do. But what?" Diana looked up. Her eyes were bright. "Maybe there's an explanation. People have complicated pasts. We all do. Maybe there's context I don't know about that Brendan hasn't felt safe enough to tell me yet." Maya stared at her mother. "I love him," Diana said, and her voice cracked just barely on the last word. "After 3 years of just surviving, I finally feel like I'm living again. You have to understand how much that means." "I do understand," Maya said. "I do. But Mom, he has 2 kids in Columbus who are asking where their father is. He took their mother's savings. He is going to do the same thing to you." Diana's eyes filled. She shook her head, not in denial exactly, more like a person trying to dislodge something painful from inside their ear. "I need more time," she whispered. "I need to talk to him. I can't just... The wedding is in 3 days." Diana said nothing. Maya picked up the folder, stood up, and walked out of the kitchen. She went upstairs to her room and closed the door behind her. She did not slam it. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and breathed carefully. After a while, she turned on the small lamp on her nightstand. In its amber glow, the photographs on her dresser were visible: Calvin and Diana at their wedding, the three of them at Maya's first birthday, and the stick figure family drawing she had made at 5 years old. A yellow house. 3 figures holding hands. Simple and whole. She picked up the framed wedding photo and held it. "Dad," Ma, she said quietly to the empty room. "I don't know what to do anymore." She sat with that for a long time. Then slowly she set the photograph down. She picked up her phone and sent Marcus one message. She didn't stop it. "Wedding is still on. I'm going to say something at the church." Marcus replied in under a minute, "I'll be there. Front pew, you won't be alone." Maya turned off the lamp. In the morning, she would put on a white dress and walk into that church and stand at the front of the room and smile. And then she would wait for exactly the right moment. She would only get one. Grace Chapel on a Saturday morning in December was the kind of beautiful that makes you forget briefly that the world outside contains anything difficult. Morning light came through the tall, stained glass windows in long bands of amber and blue falling across the white-draped pews and the hundreds of white roses that lined every aisle. Someone had strung small, warm lights along the rafters. The organ was playing something slow and lovely. 200 guests settled into their seats in murmuring clusters, and the air smelled like gardenias and candle wax. Maya stood in the vestibule in her white bridesmaid dress and held her bouquet and looked at all of it and thought he chose this on purpose. Not the venue that had been Diana's choice, but everything else. The scale of it, the audience, the sense of ceremony and permanence that a room like this creates. Brendan had pushed for the big wedding, the full guest list, the videographer. At the time, Diana had laughed and called him romantic. Now Maya understood what it actually was. A man who intends to vanish does not build an elaborate stage, but a man who needs witnesses to a legal document does. She pressed the thought down and breathed. Across the vestibule, Brendan stood with his best man, a colleague named Ted, who had flown in from out of town and whom none of Diana's family had ever met before today. Brendan was in a charcoal suit with a white pocket square, and he looked exactly the way a groom is supposed to look, assured, relaxed, like a man who has everything exactly where he wants it. He caught Maya's eye. He smiled the same easy, manufactured smile she had been watching for 7 months, and held her gaze for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. A reminder. Nobody in that church is going to believe a word you say. Maya looked away first. Not because she was afraid, because she was done looking at him. She found Uncle Marcus in the 4th row from the back as the guests were seated. He was in a dark suit, sitting straight, his hands on his knees. He did not wave or nod. He just held her gaze for a moment, steady and certain, and that was enough. The processional music changed. The guests rose. Diana appeared at the back of the chapel on the arm of an old family friend, and the collective intake of breath from the congregation was genuine. She was luminous, a deep ivory gown that set off her brown skin beautifully, her hair swept up her shoulders back. She was smiling the way Maya had not seen her smile since before Calvin died. Open and unguarded and full. Maya's chest tightened so sharply she nearly looked away. She did not look away. She kept her eyes on her mother's face all the way down the aisle, memorizing it, the joy in it, the hope in it, knowing that in a matter of minutes, she was going to be the one to change it, and that there was no version of this where that didn't hurt. The officiant, a silver-haired pastor named Reverend Cole, welcomed the congregation warmly. His voice was practiced and kind, and the room settled around his words the way rooms do when someone genuinely at ease is speaking. Brendan took Diana's hands. Diana looked up at him. Maya stood 3 feet away and kept her breathing even. Reverend Cole moved through the opening words of the ceremony. The declaration of intent. The reading from Corinthians that Diana had chosen love is patient. Love is kind, delivered by a woman Maya didn't recognize, possibly a colleague from the hospital. Maya stood still and waited. Then Reverend Cole reached the words she had been waiting for. If anyone present knows of any lawful reason why these 2 people may not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The room went quiet in the way that rooms always do at this moment in a wedding. A brief ceremonial silence that everyone expects to pass in 2 seconds and lead seamlessly into the next passage. Maya stepped forward. She did not shout. She did not need to. She simply stepped out of the line of bridesmaids, moved 2 paces forward into the aisle, and said in a clear, carrying voice, "I need to speak, please." The silence that followed was a completely different kind of silence. It dropped over the room like a physical weight. 200 people turned. Reverend Cole's hands, which had been poised to continue, went still. The organ had already stopped. Brendan's expression did not change. That was the thing that struck Maya most. His face stayed perfectly composed, as if he had rehearsed for this. He even let out a brief, soft exhale, the kind a patient parent might use when a child acts out at an inconvenient moment. "Maya," he said gently, warmly to the room as much as to her. "Sweetheart, don't." Her voice was quiet. Absolute. "Oh, don't call me sweetheart." Diana had turned. Her face had gone from confusion to fear in the space of a breath. "Maya, baby, what?" "Mom." Maya looked directly at her mother and nowhere else. "His name is not Brendan Calloway. It's Brandon Calloway. He has a wife in Columbus, Ohio. Her name is Cheryl. They've been married for 9 years. He left her 6 months ago with 2 small children and took $63,000 from their joint savings account. She reached into the small clutch she had been carrying all morning and removed the folded marriage certificate. She walked to the front and held it out to Reverend Cole, who took it with hands that were no longer steady. The room did not erupt. Not immediately. It went somewhere stranger first, a profound collective stillness, like 200 people all forgetting to breathe at the same moment. And then every single head turned toward the man at the altar. Brendan's smile was still there, but something behind his eyes had shifted. The mask had not fallen yet, but it had cracked. The crack in Brendan's mask lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then he laughed. It was a good laugh. Warm, rueful, the laugh of a reasonable man confronted with an unreasonable situation. He released Diana's hands and turned slightly to face the congregation, opening his posture, the way a politician does when he wants to signal transparency. "Folks, I am so sorry you're witnessing this," he said, and his voice carried perfectly in the high-ceilinged chapel. It's a difficult situation. Maya has had a very hard time accepting this relationship from the beginning, and I think today that grief has come out in a way that none of us wanted. He said grief with precisely the right amount of gentleness, acknowledgement without accusation. He was good. Maya had known he was good. She had prepared for good. She had not come with feelings. She had come with documents. "Reverend Cole," she said, addressing the pastor directly and loudly enough for the room to hear. "The marriage certificate I gave you is a certified copy obtained from the Franklin County Clerk's office in Columbus, Ohio. Brandon James Calloway married Cheryl Ann Morrow 9 years ago. There has been no divorce filing in the state of Ohio, the state of Tennessee, or any other state." I checked. A murmur moved through the crowd, like wind through tall grass. Brendan's smile did not waver. Sweetheart, I understand you believe. I also have this. Maya reached into her clutch again and removed her phone. She had the audio file pulled up and ready. She pressed play and held the phone up, and Cheryl Calloway's voice filled Grace Chapel, clear and unhurried and devastating. That's my husband. I recognized him from the photo immediately. We've been married 9 years. He left 6 months ago with $63,000 from our joint account. I have 2 children. I want to be very clear about that 2 children who ask me every day where their father is. The murmur in the congregation became something louder, not chaos, something more like a collective reckoning, the sound of 200 people simultaneously revising what they thought they understood. Diana had not moved. She stood at the altar with her hands at her sides, her bouquet hanging loose in her right hand, and she was looking at Brendan with an expression that Maya had never seen on her mother's face before. It was not anger. It was not devastation. It was the look of a woman doing a very fast and very painful calculation. Brendan took one step toward Diana, his voice dropping to something intimate even in the open room. Baby, listen to me. I can explain all of this. The situation with Cheryl is complicated. There are legal matters still being resolved. Things I should have told you, I know that. But this is not what it looks like. And I need you to trust me right now. Diana looked at his hand on her arm. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "Did you take her money?" Brendan blinked. It was the first involuntary thing his face had done all morning. "Did you take $63,000 from a woman with 2 children?" Diana repeated, and her voice was not loud, but it was absolute, "and then come here and ask me to put you on my bank accounts." The room held its breath. Brendan's hand dropped from her arm. Something shifted in his posture so subtle that most people in the room probably missed it, but Maya saw it. The performance was recalibrating. He was deciding what move came next. He chose flight. He turned and walked, not walked because running would confirm everything, back up the aisle toward the vestibule. Brisk and purposeful, like a man with somewhere important to be. He made it 8 rows. Marcus stood up from the 4th row. From the back stepped directly into the aisle and planted himself there. He was 6'2" and 230 pounds of man who had spent 30 years doing physical labor, and he stood with his arms loose at his sides and said nothing at all. Brendan stopped. 2 men from the congregation, friends of Diana's from the hospital, both large, both now on their feet, had moved to flank the aisle on either side without being asked. Nobody had coordinated this. It had simply happened the way certain things happen in rooms full of people who have all arrived at the same conclusion at the same moment. Brendan looked at Marcus. He looked at the men beside him. He looked back at the altar where Diana stood. He sat down in the nearest pew. Slowly, like a man who had just run out of moves and knew it. Diana had already taken out her phone. Maya watched her mother dial 911, watched her lift the phone to her ear and stand straight in her ivory wedding dress in front of 200 witnesses and say clearly and without any tremor in her voice, "Yes, I need to report fraud. The man I was about to marry has a legal wife in Columbus, Ohio, and I believe he has been targeting me financially. He is currently present at Grace Chapel on Bellevue Boulevard in Memphis. Please send someone." She listened for a moment. "Yes, I'll stay on the line." She lowered the phone slightly and looked at Maya across the length of the chapel. Maya had not moved from where she stood near the altar. She was still holding her clutch. Her bouquet had ended up on the floor at some point. She did not remember dropping it. Diana looked at her daughter for a long moment. Her eyes were full. Then she walked down the aisle past the frozen guests, past the white roses, past the man sitting in the pew who had almost taken everything, and when she reached Maya, she put her arms around her and held on. Maya closed her eyes. Outside in the December air, the first siren was already audible. Growing closer. 2 police cruisers arrived at Grace Chapel at 11:47 a.m. Detective Samuel Okafor, Nigerian-American, 15 years on the force currently assigned to financial crimes, was not one of the first responders, but he arrived 20 minutes later in a plain sedan, still in his weekend clothes, because the dispatch description had matched something already sitting in an open case file on his desk. He walked into the chapel, which had mostly emptied by then, except for a cluster of Diana's closest friends and family who had stayed without being asked, and he found Diana and Maya sitting together in the front pew with Maya's arm around her mother's shoulders. He sat across from them and introduced himself without ceremony. "To Mrs. Lawson," he said. "The name Brandon James Calloway has come up before in our office. What you tell me today may connect to a pattern we've been tracking for several years." Diana looked at him. "How many women?" Okafor was quiet for a moment. "We currently have documentation on 3 prior cases: Atlanta 2016, Nashville 2019, and Columbus, which you are already aware of. There may be others we haven't identified yet." Diana absorbed this without expression. Beside her, Maya felt her mother's arm tighten almost imperceptibly. "Chachitachi?" "The pattern," Okafor continued carefully, "is consistent. He identifies recently widowed women in stable financial situations. He presents himself as successful and trustworthy. He establishes emotional intimacy, quickly begins integrating himself into financial accounts or estate planning under the guise of helpfulness, and either marries or prepares to marry before liquidating assets and disappearing. In the Atlanta case, he was gone 4 days after the wedding. The woman lost $112,000. "He hadn't gotten to my accounts yet," Diana said quietly. "No, he had not." Okafor looked at Maya when he said it. He was stopped before that stage. Maya said nothing. She looked at her hands. Brandon. She could not think of him as Brendan anymore. That name belonged to a fiction had been taken to the precinct without incident. He had not spoken a word after Diana called 911. He had sat in the pew with his hands on his knees and his face completely neutral. And when the officers arrived, he had stood and walked out with them cooperatively, as if this too were simply a performance he had decided on. Control even in surrender. At the precinct, he asked for a lawyer immediately and said nothing further. It did not matter. The documentation Maya had collected, combined with the certified marriage certificate from Ohio and Cheryl Calloway's recorded testimony, was enough to hold him. Cheryl had already booked a flight to Memphis. She landed that evening, and Okafor met her at the airport personally. The 2 women, Diana and Cheryl, met for the first time in a small conference room at the precinct at 6 p.m. Maya had expected the meeting to be painful. She had not expected it to be quiet. Cheryl sat across from Diana, and they looked at each other for a moment, and then Cheryl said, "I'm sorry. I know that sounds strange coming from me, but I'm sorry this happened to you." Diana said, "I'm sorry about your children." They sat with that for a while. What emerged over the following days was a portrait of Brandon Calloway that was both more calculated and more pathetic than Maya had imagined. His real background was traceable: a fraud conviction in his 20s, a sealed record he had managed to obscure through name variations and state hopping. The Brendan versus Brandon distinction was deliberate, close enough that a casual background check pulling by full name would sometimes merge the records, different enough that a formal legal search under either name alone would miss the other. He had exploited that gap 3 times successfully before Memphis. The financial investigation uncovered that Brandon had already, without Diana's knowledge, contacted her bank about joint account access. He had positioned himself as her fiancé, seeking to add his name pre-marriage, a process the bank had begun but not completed. 3 more days and a notarized form, and he would have had access to Diana's savings, Calvin's insurance payout, and the college fund she had been building for Maya since Calvin died. The college fund. When Okafor told Diana about it, she sat very still in the hard precinct chair with her hands folded on the table and said nothing for a full 30 seconds. Then she turned to Maya, who was sitting beside her. "The money your father left for you," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "He almost took your father's money." Maya reached across and covered her mother's hands with her own. "He didn't," she said. "Mom?" He didn't. Diana's composure, which had held through 8 hours of statements and interviews, and the particular fluorescent cruelty of a police precinct on a December Saturday, finally broke. Not dramatically, Diana was not a dramatic woman. She simply lowered her head and cried quietly, and Maya put an arm around her and let her. Marcus, who had been sitting across the room giving his own statement, looked over. He said nothing. He just stood up, walked over, and placed one large hand on Diana's shoulder and kept it there. Outside the window of the precinct, Memphis was moving through a normal Saturday evening, people walking to restaurants, headlights passing on the wet street. The world had not registered what had happened at Grace Chapel that morning. It never did for the people inside these rooms. But Okafor, gathering his files at the end of the night, paused at the doorway and looked back at the 3 of them, Diana, Maya, Marcus, sitting together in the institutional light. He looked specifically at Maya. "How old did you say you were?" he asked. 16, she said. He nodded once. "You put together a better case file than half my department," he said simply, and left. The trial lasted 4 days. Brandon James Calloway was charged with bigamy, wire fraud, and attempted theft by deception in the state of Tennessee. The Columbus charges, filed separately by Cheryl's attorney, added felony theft and abandonment of dependents under Ohio law. The Atlanta and Nashville cases, both previously closed due to insufficient evidence, were reopened following Okafor's investigation, and 2 more women came forward to provide testimony. In the end, Brandon sat at a defense table in Shelby County Criminal Court and heard a judge sentence him to 12 years in federal prison. He showed no expression when the sentence was read. The performance at last had nowhere left to go. Diana was in the courtroom. She sat in the 3rd row with Marcus on one side and Maya on the other, and when the gavel came down, she released a single long breath and looked straight ahead. And that was all. Afterward, on the courthouse steps in the thin February sunlight, Marcus put his arms around both of them and held on, and nobody said anything for a while because nothing needed to be said. The months that followed were not easy, and Diana would be the first to tell you that. Recovery from something like this is not linear. It does not move in a clean arc from pain to resolution. It moves the way real things move, sideways sometimes, and backward occasionally, and then forward in small increments that you only recognize when you look back at where you were. Diana went to therapy. She had resisted it after Calvin died. She was a nurse. She understood its value intellectually, but accepting it for herself felt like admitting a weakness she could not afford. She stopped resisting. She sat across from a therapist named Dr. Reeves every Thursday evening, and she talked, and it was hard, and it helped. She also called Cheryl twice. The calls were not long. They were not the beginning of a friendship exactly, but they were something, 2 women checking on each other across state lines, making sure the other was still standing. Cheryl had gotten a job at a medical billing company. The children were doing well. She had filed for full legal divorce and received it within 6 months. She had stopped waiting for Brandon to become someone different. The hardest part, Cheryl told Diana on their second call, wasn't the money. It was accepting that I had loved a performance, that there was no one there to actually be angry at. Diana understood that completely. She told Maya about that conversation at the kitchen table one evening in March, and Maya listened carefully, and then said, "I think there was someone to be angry at. He made real choices. He just made sure it was hard to see them." Diana looked at her daughter for a moment. "When did you get this wise?" Maya almost smiled. "I had a good dad. Spring came to Memphis in its particular way, sudden and extravagant, the whole city erupting into dogwood blossoms and warm evenings almost overnight. Maya went back to school, back to practice, back to the ordinary rhythms of being 16, and found that they fit differently now. Not worse. Just differently the way clothes fit after you have grown without noticing. Her teammates knew something had happened at her mom's wedding. It had been in the local news, briefly a paragraph in the Memphis commercial appeal, picked up by one regional TV station. Maya did not discuss it. She did not need to. She came to practice and ran drills and hit her shots and let the work be the conversation. Coach Henderson pulled her aside after a Thursday practice in April. He was a compact, serious man who expressed approval through compression rather than volume. "The college scouts are coming to the Invitational in June," he said. "Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and 2 others. I've told them to watch number 23. Maya held her basketball under her arm. "Okay. You're going to be ready?" "I know." He studied her for a moment. "You doing all right in general?" She considered the question honestly, the way her father had taught her to consider questions. "I'm getting there," she said. He nodded. "Good enough." The University of Tennessee letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late May, a thick envelope in the mailbox that Maya held for a moment before bringing inside. She set it on the kitchen table and waited for Diana to come home from her shift. She did not open it alone. Diana walked in at 6:15, still in her scrubs, and stopped when she saw the envelope on the table and Maya sitting across from it. She sat down. She looked at her daughter. "Together," she said. "Together," Maya said. The letter was 2 pages. Full athletic scholarship. 4 years. Beginning in the fall. Diana read it twice. Then she put it down flat on the table and pressed both palms on top of it, as if she needed to feel that it was real. Her eyes were full and her shoulders were shaking slightly, and she was smiling so hard it looked like it hurt. "Your father," she managed, "would have lost his mind." Maya laughed genuinely, the full version, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep. "He would have framed every single page." Diana reached across the table and took Maya's hand in both of hers. They sat like that for a while in the kitchen of the house on Prescott Avenue, with the late spring light coming through the window and the photographs on the refrigerator door, Calvin at Maya's first birthday. The 3 of them at the Grand Canyon, one new one of Diana and Maya on the courthouse steps in February. Marcus's arm around them both. The house was theirs. The money was safe. The future was open, and the woman who had tried to take all of it was in a federal prison cell exactly where he belonged.
Some people will tell you that a 16-year-old girl should have stayed quiet, that she should have trusted the adults, that she should have waited. But dignity does not wait. Love does not wait. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do, the thing that changes everything, is simply to step forward and tell the truth, even when every voice around you says the room won't listen. Maya stepped forward. The room listened. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that courage has no minimum age, tell us where you watched it from. Your voice in the comments matters more than you think. And if you want more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, subscribe. We put one out every week. We'll see you there. See.